Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this first ever networking event at the Garden Cinema. Thank you for bearing with us. I know a few of you had booked for a later event at 6 o'clock and we had to shuffle things round, mainly due to how popular it turned out to be. So thank you so much for rebooking and either changing your plans or just coming in earlier. I'm not going to speak too long because I'm not the expert here. I'm just going to quickly introduce our guests and let them introduce themselves. And then I will ask a few questions. Some of these have been sent in by some members. And of course, I will then open it up to you all to ask what you want to ask and comment and so on. It's all very informal. So just, enjoy it, get out of it what you need. And then afterwards, we have about an hour in there. And then, of course, we can mingle in the bar afterwards. So without further ado, I will introduce my two guests, producer Susan Simnett and producer Georgia Goggin. Thank you so much for being here with us. So I won't say too much about your respective careers because there's a little blurb on the website, but more because I want you to explain a little bit more about what you do, where you've worked. So if we can start maybe with you, Susan, if you can talk a bit about your background in producing.
Hello. So I came to this industry rather late in life with rather naive ambition to make a film, not realising quite how challenging it would be. But it's been a really interesting 7-8 years of journey to finally, actually, I've just finished a feature documentary which we released last year and actually screened here at the Garden Cinema. I'm sure we'll talk about that process during the course of the session. I've also made some short films along the way, and that process has been really informative in terms of my understanding of the industry. And I also exec on other people's projects, and I've been a work for hire for some bigger production companies too.
Thank you very much. And how about you, Georgia?
I'm a writer and director and producer. I've been in the industry, I guess, a little bit over a decade after doing a degree at university in film, but spending most of my time doing plays. I've made masses of short films as an exec, director, writer and producer, different times, different roles. And I work most often with a writer-director called Dion Edwards. And she and I made our first feature film called Pretty Red Dress, which was just released in June and it's also screened here.
Exactly. Both very successful films. Thank you so much. So you had the idea of a show of hands, and I think the first one that might be quite useful is who in the room knows what a producer actually does? Oh, actually, quite a few.
I know. I'm blocking the light. Yeah, sorry, that was confusing. I just wanted to see the hands.
Okay, so quite a number. Are there any producers in the room, or aspiring producers? Oh, what happened there?
Recovering.
Thank you very much. Good enough. Lovely. Thank you very much. So I'm actually going to dive right in, really. I've had a few really interesting questions sent in, and I think they are pertinent to probably many of you. I had someone write in to ask, because you have, and this is a very interesting one, because you have slightly different trajectories in the way you got into producing. So the question was about how important it was to work on short films before moving on to features. Now, I know you, Susan, moved on to shorts after your first feature. So what would you say to that?
Well, as I say, I came in late and I thought I don't have 10 years to make short films before I make a feature, so I'll go straight to the feature. Obviously, that wasn't as easy as I had hoped. And during the course of that, I did start making short films, and it was incredibly useful and informative to see what a film set might be on a micro scale over 3 or 4 days, as opposed to engaging for 4-6 weeks with a lot more money. To see how the various departments work, what the key connections are to make an on-set productive and happy, and just to go through the whole journey from start to finish and release and sharing it with an audience. The scale is much shorter, so that was really useful. And finding the people that you want to work with and how they work together and what stories you want to tell and how they can be expressed in different ways. And so I think it's something that's absolutely essential for people to do before embarking on anything bigger or alongside doing something bigger.
Would you agree, Georgia? You produced short films before your first feature.
Yeah, I did. And I think I would agree that it's important. I think the other, as well as everything you've just said, I think the other thing that it gives you is that when you then want to raise funding for your feature film, you already are a producer, demonstrably, and people can look at stuff and you'll have already encountered some of the problems that you will encounter on a feature. And I think it's really good for your own confidence, because I think the kind of defining feature of a producer is just that one day you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm a producer, and then you do something to prove it. But you have to say that you're a producer first. Like, nobody will give you the piece of paper that says that you are. You can't qualify as one. The proof of it is the doing it. And to do it, you just decide to do it. And so I think the routine and the action of doing the shorts is what gives you that. There's a kind of tautology in everything I've just said, but I hope you know what I mean by it.
Well, actually, talking about you just actively doing it, which makes you, which gives you that role, you were in-house first. You worked as an in-house producer, and then you went freelance. Yeah. So how was that process? How easy was it, or difficult?
Well, I when I was at the beginning of my career, I originally wanted to be a writer and then a director, and then got sidetracked into producing plays at university because I was really organised and a massive people pleaser, which is a whole other tangent, but very relevant. And then through the course of doing the plays and stuff, kind of got interested in development, the sort of nebulous idea of development. And then I asked 100 companies. I need work experience, and I asked 100 companies for work experience, and I know it was 100 because I said you're not allowed to stop until you've done 100. And of them, 3 came back to me. One said, no, we don't have any room for you. One said, yes, we do have room for you in 3 months' time. And one said, yeah, come for a coffee. And then I worked at that place for 4 years, and I worked there as an assistant to the 2 producers. So I learned from them what being a producer was, and what development was, and we made 2 films in the 4 years that I was there. So I saw them work on 2 really, really hard feature films, and a lot of challenges that they went through, and that sort of helped me. And then while that was going on, I was making my own shorts on the weekends and the evenings and all the rest of it, and had already started to work with Dion. So I was kind of assisting producers and being a producer in my own small way at the same time, and those 2 experiences really fed in to each other. And I think actually I mean, you'd have to ask them, but I think the fact that I was producing on the side over time gave my employers confidence to give me more responsibility, over the movies that we were making. And so that ultimately the film that I was making when I first met you in 2015, I was an associate producer of that film, and the previous film that we'd made, I was just the assistant to the producers. So I was able to sort of progress, I guess. So yeah, it was very helpful. And then from there I decided to go freelance and just produce for myself.
Thank you. And you, Susan, were saying earlier that you got in is a bit of a career change, getting into producing. So can you talk us through that step from just being a non-producer to a producer? How did that happen? How do you get involved in a project like this?
I'm still not quite sure. I had a career in advertising way, way, way back, and went back after having had 2 children, and that it was too complicated to run both in tandem. So I wrapped up that career and was at home, but always curious and always intrigued and engaged with any opportunities that came my way, which took me down all sorts of rabbit holes, but interesting ones and interesting businesses. And along the way, I met people and got interested in the film space. And I think the things that I was saying and the work that I was the conversations we were having, scripts I was reading, giving feedback on, were really well received. And I thought, well, this kind of resonates, so let's follow this thread. And this is where it's got me. But I think the interesting thing about, for me, it was I had no reference point to start with, and I had to build it all up from scratch. And sometimes not having any reference point and not knowing anything makes it easier, because you don't know how enormous the challenges are going to be, and you just deal with them as they come. But there was one point when I hadn't done a short, but I had to convince myself and say, yes, I'm a producer. And you'd go out and introduce yourself and say, yes, I'm a film producer. And the first question you get is, oh, so what have you produced?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, nothing yet.
But
wait
I'm doing
and see.
it right now.
Wait
You're
and
seeing
see.
it.
And it's taken 8 years to be able to say, I've produced this film and it is out there and you can see it there. And that's the journey. It's challenging, exciting, exhilarating, but it's not easy.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to my questions. I'm wondering which one would be the most relevant just now. I think, well, let's the elephant in the room. I think this one a lot of people had. What are your tips to gain finance for your films? Basically, access to money. What would you recommend? I should add that the question was followed with, how daunting or enjoyable do you find this process?
No, not enjoyable. My first tips are like, be born into a wealthy family, possibly too late. Wealthy spouse, maybe too late. I don't know, a life insurance scam. Yeah, there's got to be a lot of easier ways. But I mean, we joke, we're actually very, very privileged in this country to have public money for films. And especially if you're starting out, they are very, very supportive, and their remit is to support new talent. So, it's an insane luxury that we have that. And, a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to go to the Sundance Creative Producers Summit, which sounds very grand. It is kind of grand. But I was talking to a load of American producers, and they don't have that. Plus, they have no healthcare. And I just felt like any complaint I had was so irrelevant and so minor in comparison to that landscape. So we're very lucky here, and finding finance is hard, but there is that privilege. And so I would say, for starters, no matter what project you're doing, go to Film4, BFI or BBC. Like, to not go to them is an act of madness. And I've heard that from, I won't name him just in case he doesn't want to be named, but from one of the UK's most senior producers who's made, dozens and dozens of films. And he's like, every film, the first thing I do is go to BBC, BFI and Film4, because it's the best money in the business, and you don't want to consider any money until you've considered theirs. So we're lucky to have that. But I would say my biggest tip to looking for finance, whoever your potential financier might be, is make sure that your approach to them feels like an absolute slam dunk. Like, try and anticipate every question they might have, and try and stack up your pitch to them in the same way that you would structure an essay. And it's not that you're going to say an essay or they're ever going to read it, but in the same way that in an essay you start with your question and your introduction, then you make it point by point by point by point, and then you conclude with a real bang. Nothing in that essay can be out of line. No thread unanswered. No diversions. No tangents. Everything has to stack up exactly to that persuasive argument, and that's what you're doing. It is a persuasive argument. And so when you're doing an application form, or when you're in a conversation, or it's adding all of those things up. And I would say this, of course, this is how I think of this, because I'm a grammar school kid. This is how we were taught from a really young age, so this is drilled into me, but I do think that it helps. And I think sometimes people see an application form and they're like, it says upload your CV, bang, there's my CV uploaded. No, missed opportunity. Look at your CV. Is everything on your CV the essential ingredient that's going to be the thing that persuades them? How can you rephrase it to make it relevant to this project, etc., etc.? Just to make it do your best to make it a slam dunk. That's helped me. And I've also been on the other side of it. People apply to me for money now. I have another role as a commissioner, and that you can tell when people have done that, and you can tell when people haven't. And it is persuasive when people have used every word of an application to persuade you.
Well, it shows that they've taken the time and the care
And when you read it, you think, this is a producer who's not going to leave a stone unturned. And that is a skill that's going to like make the whole film better.
Thank you very much. How about you, Susan? What would your top tips be?
Absolutely. I think that it feeds into what people forget when they're making films. It's not forget, but it's very easy to get caught up in the creativity of the film and what you want it to look like and the story you're telling. But actually, when you're talking to financiers, it's so crucial that you treat it as a business. And it goes back to understanding your audience, not just who the audience of the film is, the audience you're talking to, and what it is that they are going to get out of what you're proposing. So yes, being able to close the deal because you know what they want, whether it's to come on set, whether it's to support you because they like you or they feel that you're a good entrepreneur, whatever it is, you have to read the relationship, the conversation as well, and do your due diligence and understand what they are looking for, what you are tapping into that is relevant to them, and feed that into the application, the conversation. And on top of that, I think it's just network the hell out of it. You never know who's going to be interested. So many times you meet people in a completely different context and they have a little side interest in film, and you could be the link that brings them into the industry. And so I think, yes, absolutely the core of it is the soft money in this country, which is incredibly supportive of films, people, the business. But think outside the box, move outside the industry as well, and just join the dots throughout. And I think that's kind of, to the other point, I think that's the exciting part of it, is that you can bring people into the industry as well. And give people new experiences, which is exciting. Yes, it's daunting because you're always knocking on doors of people you don't know, or you've got to have it slammed in your face, or you've got to move on. But it's another aspect of the business which is creative.
I think the other thing I'd add to that I found and still find really hard is to get over how much money is to other people, if you see what I mean. Like, to me, £1,000 is like an astonishing, eye-watering amount of money. To somebody else, it's pocket money, and that is so difficult to get your head around. And that sometimes I think it makes you feel like you're going to somebody for, let's say £10,000 for a short or something, and it makes you feel like you're asking for their firstborn. But depending on who you're talking to, that really may not be the case, and you have to kind of almost brace yourself for that, because it's frightening to find out that for some people £1,000 is pocket change, but it is also essential to making films. So, but if you can't get used to that, you kind of can't have a conversation with those people either. So it's hard, but I think it has to be done.
That's a really good point. I guess otherwise you end up underselling the project because you feel guilty about asking for that much money.
Like, even if I can give just a silly example, I was so before we made Pretty Red Dress, when we were doing the camera test for Pretty Red Dress, I was trying to deliver to their head of production the budget for the thing, and I was delivering it with a decimal point and then numbers after the decimal point, and they were like, what? I don't want to see round it up. I want it in tens. They just don't want to see that. And I was like, oh, okay, but the pennies were in there. No, because of the amount of money that they've got, that's not helpful to them. Actually slows them down. But to me, I was like, every 50p counts. It's 37 pence, so I'll put that it's 37 pence. But that's not helpful.
That's such a good point. Thank you so much. I'm aware I've been talking for quite a while, so I do want to have people give people the opportunity to ask questions and comments or anything. So we have a roving mic, which my colleague very kindly will pass along. Do we have any? Yep, a question just there on the side of the. Sorry, it is quite dark at the far end of the room. So
Hi,
do wave if we don't see. Thank you.
I saw Pretty Red Dress here recently, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So the question really picks up from talking about finance. From where did you finance that film, and how much was the total budget?
I won't speak to the total budget, but that's a BBC BFI film with the tax credit, cash flowed by a company called Great Point Media. Is everybody familiar with the phrase cash flowing the tax credit? No, I've seen one shake of the head, so I'm going to go for it. Yeah. So in this country, although the rules have slightly just changed, but I'll talk about it in general terms, the government does a tax rebate for a percentage of the budget, which is roughly 20%. So if you spend, £100 here, you get £20 back from the government, but they don't give you the money back for quite a while, actually, by the time it all works out, because you have to submit your annual accounts to them and then they pay it to you back. But obviously you need that money to spend it up front. So various companies will lend you that money essentially, and they'll take a small cut of what you get back. So if it's in your £100 budget and you're going to cash flow, they're going to cash flow for you the £20. When it comes back, they might want to keep like £2 of it and you keep 18. So your total budget is £98 basically, because you've paid that finance fee to them. So Great Point Media did that for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have any other questions in the room? Yeah, one hand at the back and then I'll come to the front. Thank you.
Thanks. So for directors who approach you wanting to work with you, what's the best way? What's the best way to make that approach? Do they kind of lurk around film festivals hoping you've seen their film? Do they get in touch with you directly? So how does that work?
A question?
All of those probably. If a director is interested in working with us, then email, pick up the phone. I'm always happy to meet new people, creative talent, and if you have an idea that you want to make happen, even better. Or you know of a writer with a script that you want to partner with and bring that picture to life, then just email.
Yeah, I would say remember that you're really valuable and that producers desperately need writers and directors. It's very easy to feel like you're I don't know what the word is, but like the needy one, but they need you too. So that's not to say that it's necessarily always going to go your way, but just to say that like anticipate that on some level your approach will be welcome because you are an essential ingredient in the picture. But with that in mind, keep it brief.
And I would add to that also is, again, back to the point before, is to explain why you want to work with us, because I get an awful lot of blanket emails. Dear Susan Simnett, can I work with you? It's got a bit more personal.
Yeah. And also, my least favourite email to receive is the script is done, the director's attached, the writer's good to go, we've got all the heads of department, we're shooting here, it's happening next week, we just need the money. Can you sort us out? Like, what's in it for me? No. So yeah, don't approach like that.
Thank you very much. Do we have a pressing question? We had you at the front, because I had just a slight on a slight tangent. Just going off on what you just said about finding money, and then I'll come to you straight away. Could you shed a little bit more light about where you get at what stage you get involved in the project? So someone's come to you and then they've pretty much planned everything out and they just want you for the money. Should you be involved really at the sort of writing stage?
Well, I mean, I can't. Every producer's different and every project's different, so I can't really say definitively. Maybe there are producers who love a project to come really packaged and just be like, great, because I'm the money, but I would say that those are more kind of financiers and execs than the way that I produce. But I feel like I should also mention, also because we're going into a networking context after this, that I don't really produce at the moment for anybody that isn't Dion. So if Dion's here, we can talk in the bar. But and in the case of Dion is the writer, so she generates the idea, and then normally within a day or so I'll have heard about the idea, and so I'm there from the beginning. But previously, when I was producing for other people, I like to be on really early. I don't mind if there's already a script, but I want to be a part of the development of it, because that's part of the making it both our story to tell and part of me like kind of climbing inside it and then understanding how I can like best lay the track for that film. And I think I would struggle with it if it kind of came made, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there are so many different facets of being a producer, and some people specialise in finance, some are just in creative development. I, like you, I like to be there at the inception, to have a vision for what kind of film I want to make and where I want it to go and how I want it to be presented, and to bring the people to that builds it up in a way that we're all aligned. Because it's a very long journey. It's a lot of time and a lot of emotional commitment, and you want to be spending the 3, 4, 5, etc. years with people that you trust and value and respect. So having something ready packaged is fine for a jobbing process, but it's not really where I want to be.
Thank you very much. It's interesting to know more about the integral part the producer plays really in the development of the project. Thank you. Yes, please. We have just a question at the front.
Hi, my name is Angela and I'm a writer producer and I'm directing my first short. So my question is kind of linked to that last gentleman's question. When you're approaching the likes of yourselves or a production company, or what would you expect in that email? Would you expect the budget, breakdown, what the script? You've kind of answered in it in terms of you personally want to start just with the script, but is there anything else? Let's say I have a few different projects producing wise in different stages, but gunning for the execs, what would you approach with? What's your pitch package that you'd like to see? Would you like to see that they've done the work and like know their film, or what goes with the email?
Well, I guess it would depend what you want from that producer, what you're looking for. But I would recommend no attachments to a first email as a rule of thumb. I think it's fine if it's like a link to another film that you've made or something, but just in terms of the feeling of like work, of generating work for somebody before they've even, had a decision to engage with you or not. So I think in the interest of keeping it brief, start with who you are, a great short synopsis, what the hook of the thing is and why you care about it and why you think it's relevant to the person that you're writing to. And then you might mention the other materials that you have, so they can say, yeah, at this stage I'd love to see this, that or this in reply to you. But beyond that, I probably wouldn't do more.
I agree, keep it short. But I do like a single attachment and a visual one that shows some kind of tonal expression of what you're trying to achieve, because that I find much easier to interpret than just a log line.
Would that be like a pitch deck or just one page?
It could be one page, but no more than 10.
Perfect.
But and visual, with not too much writing on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just come to you. We just had one question there first, but I can't remember who. Go ahead, I'll come to whoever raised their hand.
Thank you. This is a question for you, Georgia. So I had a look at the Uncertain Kingdom platform that you have. And just yesterday I was watching Honesty on the Deeper Movies channel. And so it looks like you did a first phase with short films and now you're going into features. Can you talk to us a little bit about both the Uncertain Kingdom and what this new phase is about?
Sure. So for anybody who's not seen this or familiar with this, the Uncertain Kingdom is a development fund which we began in 2018, end of 2018, with the idea to fund 20 short films that together were a snapshot of where the UK was at the time, that sort of end of a decade. Brexit was going on, the climate crisis, all of the rest of it. And of course, the pandemic happened. So then we made 21 films so that we could engage with the pandemic. And the films collectively were, I think, quite impressive. I feel okay saying that because I just exec them. You know, I didn't make them, so I feel okay sort of saying they're really good. But together, they were quite exciting, and we felt like we had this kind of community around it, and all of the filmmakers that we'd supported, and a little bit of a buzz and a sort of some name recognition to an extent. And myself and Isabel Freer and John Jenks, who are my colleagues on the project, didn't want to sort of let that go, I guess. And we'd had such a lovely time working on it together, but making short films even as an exec and as a sort of commissioner of them is an incredibly time intensive process. And we knew we couldn't do that again. So we pivoted the fund to supporting the development of feature films instead, with a particular focus. And this is historically something that John Jenks has been interested in, particularly the fall off between people making their first feature and then their second feature. I can't recall the stats off the top of my head, but it's pretty shocking. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that for a lot of people they might make one feature and say not for me, and that's absolutely fine. But I think a lot of people fall off for other reasons and they would like to stay in the business. So we kind of focus on people who have made their first feature and are looking to make their second, and try and give them, we don't have heaps of money, but we've got a bit of money where you can just pay rent for a few months and really focus on developing that project. And so, yeah, that's what we do now. And our interest is still, similarly to the brief of The Uncertain Kingdom in its short iteration, is that we want to see projects that feel very UK specific and that urgently illuminate some aspect of our lives now, or some aspect of our who we are, or where we might be going, or where we've come from, is the natty little line that we have. So that's what we're doing now. And we're having a little break at the moment, and we're going to sort of relaunch on a more regular schedule from November. If there's anyone in the room that's relevant to, please do.
Thank you. It would be relevant to me, so I'll be looking into that.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. I saw a hand just in the middle bit. No. Oh, there. Yes, can you raise it, Hank? Thank you very much. Yeah. Sorry, it's really dark. Thank you.
If you approach online platforms directly with your product, could you give me any recommendations on, should I be taking an agent or should I be going directly myself? And what should I be looking out for?
Give us examples of who you're talking about.
Like Netflix, for example.
And when you say going to them directly, how do you mean?
With the film. So if I have the finished film before, let's say color grade and sound mastering.
Oh, I see. So if it's sort of a distribution stage.
Yes.
Not really my area of expertise. So I kind of feel like I can't really answer that question, because I've only ever released a film with the help of a sales agent who do that on my behalf. So yeah, I couldn't really say, I'm afraid. Okay, so a sales agent would be the best way to go? I think it's the normal way to go. Okay. I don't know whether it's necessarily the best. I guess there's always room for innovation, but I don't know.
Georgia, you've played a huge role in distribution.
It is really hard, particularly with the bigger platforms, because there are just so many gatekeepers in the various stages to get to them. So if you can have a sales agent engage with the film, then that helps enormously, because they have decades of connections, which it's really hard to build from scratch. But getting a sales agent is not easy either. So if you are with a finished film and you don't have a sales agent at the moment, I would start speaking to sales agents if you haven't already, and in tandem, hit where you can.
Is there anyone in the room? Oh, sorry. Go.
No, just it's you might want to try with something that's a bit more accessible than Netflix at this point in time.
And are there any where can I look for sales agents?
Have you? There's a setup called Sinando, which has basically everyone in the industry with all their connections, and that's a very good access point. The British Council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, if you can get hold of ICO, and if you can get hold of a program of any of the major film festivals, Toronto, Cannes, Venice, London, most of the sales agents will have listings in their industry guides. If you can get hold of one of those, would anyone in the room benefit from a definition of a sales agent? Yes. Okay. So a sales agent is like an actor's agent in the sense that they represent the film. And they handle the kind of selling of the movie and the money and doing the deals. And they have two kind of principal points of engagement with the film, especially, in docs as well, which you can speak to, but in fiction terms, they have two kind of major points of engagement with the film. And the first one is when you're trying to finance the movie, you can partner with a sales agent, and they will bring their expertise and their experience to basically put a value on your film, and they'll produce you something called the sales estimates, which is where they'll produce you a sheet which has on the left hand side a big long list of all the territories, so worldwide, US, various bits of Europe carved up, Asia, etc. And then there'll be next to that a list of the money that the bare minimum that they'd accept, the maximum that they think is possible, and then their sort of like medium sort of take level, and that at the bottom that adds up to a number, and basically the budget for your film can't really be bigger than the bare minimum that they anticipate getting. And obviously the value of that will go up and down based on who's in the movie, the genre, how big the director, the audience that they think it is, etc., etc. So that's critical, because that helps you finance your movie. And obviously if you've got a really experienced sales agent, those numbers have more weight than if you've got some guy who started last week out of a shed. And then they kind of go quiet, and then they help you think about the marketing of the film, and then they take it to festivals from which they sell it, all the big ones, all the little ones, and then they handle all of the sales, so you don't have to kind of deal directly with your Netflixes and your whoever.
Funny enough, we did get one question that was sent to us ahead of time about this particular issue, which was, would you recommend approaching online platforms, which I assume means streamers, and as opposed to festivals, or with festivals, or what do you both think of this approach? I don't know, Susan.
Every situation is different, but the base plan would be you'd have a festival release, then you'd have a cinematic release, and then streamers. So if you were selling if you sold it to Netflix, it's unlikely to get into a festival because you've already broken that chain. So festivals first. There's basically a fairly straightforward sort of line that the majority of films kind of go through. But there are exceptions, like, if you're lucky enough to sell your film to one of the big streamers, but they also think that it's a film that they can use to raise their own prestige, then they might put it in festivals for their own purposes, essentially as a publicity exercise, because without having had festival exposure, you're very unlikely to get awards exposure. So that's kind of, they have a kind of reliance on each other. But yeah, the basic thing is sales agent at the beginning, festival, and on.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Yes, and then I'll come to you.
Hello. This might be a bit too specific for me, but hopefully it will be of use to other people. I've got ADHD, and I struggle to be able to concentrate on one project because I've always got 5 which I'm convinced are brilliant, but depending on what day of the week it is, that's the one that's brilliant. How do you, if you need to, how can you function when you haven't got one dream project that you want to focus on, but you kind of need other people to tell you what they want when you're not anyone to be asked what you've got? When you've got 5 things that you could offer rather than one thing you're driven to do. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You've only got 5? We're spinning 10 plates at a time. I think it's really hard to focus on just one all the time, because every stage there are times where you've just got to let it breathe, or you're not getting the answers you want, or the time isn't right for that project. So engage with all 5 and keep them all spinning. But I think it's if you can focus for a small period of time on one, then see where that might resonate and with who. And if it doesn't you don't get any traction, fine, just turn to the next one. And yes, eat a different one every day. That's kind of how we get through it.
Yeah, I think it sounds like you might have a superpower in this regard. I wouldn't worry about it.
Thank you very much. The gentleman here, yes. There's just a mic just coming. Thank you.
Some people entering into this industry find themselves up against their traditional families who don't fully understand that it's still a valid field. And I wondered if the talent searches, if the campaigns in small towns and everything was making people aware of this, because otherwise burgeoning talent just ends up in a Billy Elliot situation and sort of gets stifled. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you. Do you have any comments, or do you know a little bit about what goes on regionally or more locally?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
I wonder whether there's any campaign group that's trying to encourage grassroots talent away from oppressive traditionalist values who see the new media and the internet technologies and distributed systems as a threat and something they just don't understand. I just wondered if there was some effort to normalize it so that people don't get excluded.
I think the industry as a whole is constantly trying to reach out regionally, and it's hard because even the UK versus Hollywood is a tension that we have to navigate. It is a tough industry, and it's but there are ways. Whilst it might seem rigid from the outside, there are actually lots of different avenues in, and it's about finding the one that works with how you are and how you think and how you be. I came in from left field on just a random thread that took me right into the heart of it. It wasn't like, oh, I want to be there. How do I get there? I don't know. It's
a very specific question. I don't know what's been done locally, regionally, everywhere to get. Is it to get young people, to just get anyone really who's not from that world?
To overcome the sense that this is some pipe dream.
Oh, I see.
It's a valid.
Yeah. This is kind of a sort of slight bugbear of mine as well. I think. I really wish we had sort of film industry careers advisors. People, because I think. Totally fair enough. Most people don't understand how films are made. I don't understand any other industry, and I barely understand my own. So, it's totally fair enough that people don't sort of see how many careers there are in film. But especially now, brackets around the strike, there's so much getting made and so much getting made in the UK, and the rates are going up and up and up. If you want to kind of not go to university and become a grip, that's great. You're much more likely to own a house in the next 10 years than an English lit graduate. So I really wish that there were people going around and talking about those careers, because I think, if you're interested in more or less anything, you can find it in a film set or in a TV set, because they're miniature worlds. Everything that you need in real life, you need recreated in a film, and sometimes more than real life. So whatever it is that you might want to do, I really wish that we could get that message out, and because we desperately need it. We've got horrible crew shortages, so we desperately need young people to be starting.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think
not just young people,
everyone. No, exactly. Yeah. Even more so, because you're less likely to get access grants or anything like that when you're a bit older. Yeah. Everything seems to stop once you hit 26. That's it. You're on your own. Yeah. So very good point. I hope the higher powers of funding hear you. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Yeah. Oh, there's a hand at the back.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, it was just following up from what you've just said. So from your point of view, do you feel like it's quite a good time for the UK film industry at the moment? Because I'm a freelance editor. I'm having a terrible year, sort of on the point of taking a permanent job. I've been in the industry for 15 years. So I'm wondering, for younger people starting now, freelancing, from my point of view, I was thinking it looks really tough, but from what you're saying, it sounds like there's actually a lot of opportunities out there.
Well, I think it's really hard for any one individual to kind of give an overall picture of the industry. I definitely don't have the data at my fingertips to say conclusively one way or the other, and you definitely know your position better than I do. But certainly until, the strike affected sort of probably what we're going to be making in the short term, it has been quite busy. Definitely last year was busy. So for crew, I think if you're a kind of crew member where you're going from job to job, production crew specifically, and working on like bigger shows, then it's a really great time. I think for the independent space that we're in, very, very hard. But I also am not aware of anybody ever saying that it was easy. So it's really hard to say whether it's a good or bad time. And I have to say that personally, I try not to spend any time speculating on that, because this is the time that I'm in and I can't choose to be making a movie at a different time. So this is the pond I'm in. Let's crack on.
Georgia, do you have any wise words? Susan, looking straight at you as well. Any additional comments to make
just
about
to second
this?
it is, there is a lot of production happening, particularly on the TV side, high-end TV. The independent space has always been hard. I think it's particularly hard now for creating things from scratch and seeing it through to the end, because the strike is happening because the industry is pivoting in a way that no one can see the future for, and shaping that is what's happening now. And so it is an opportunity to, if there's a gap or an opportunity you see it, then this is the time to go for it. But it's very hard to see at the moment because it's quite broken in parts.
As a freelancer, how do you navigate working in that field? How would you? I guess this gentleman's thinking, right, I need to make sure I can pay my bills. I need regular income, basically. So how do you navigate the fact that you never know where the next project is coming from? What's your strategy? What would you recommend?
It goes back to spinning plates again, is just having your fingers in lots of pies and being able to play some things up and play some things down. And when the money's short, you go and work for hire and gain experience. It's never I'm not doing what I really want to do. It's never a compromise, because it's always enhancing what you're doing and your learning and your connections. But this game isn't for putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. And I think trying to have a sort of diversifying what work you can do is really powerful, because they all do feed into each other, but also be on the industry. Like, I have done all sorts of jobs to just keep going, and I'm lucky enough I don't have any dependents, so the pressure on me is slightly different, but I think, I really anticipate that, even though I'm in a good spot right now, I really anticipate that at some point I will have another job that is not in this industry to support myself, and that could happen at any time. And I don't see that as failing, and I don't see that as something that takes me necessarily away from film. It's keeping me in film. It's pushing me towards it, if anything. And that all of those bizarre nonsense jobs that I've had to keep myself in the business so far have all helped me, because I've been exposed to characters and situations and scenarios, and just had life experience that, and solved stupid problems, and that then helped me as a producer. So I think it's all to the good, really. So I think really what I'm saying is I hope you can hang in there.
Yeah,
and you never know where life takes you. Another hand?
Sorry,
Yeah.
it was me again, just one follow-up. Do you think there's any scope for the independent part of the industry to try and create almost a mini kind of distribution production network outside or do you think that's just a pipe dream, having experience of how it actually works these days?
I think it sort of exists, but maybe is less obvious. You know, companies like Modern Films, the BFI distributing its own films, including Pretty Red Dress, companies like Bounce, which is a small kind of distributor and also sort of part of publicising movies. Like, it's a really interesting and unusual model that I don't really understand how it works, but it does. So I think that network kind of, I mean, you're the perfect example. You're doing it right now. So yeah, I should shut up and you should speak to that.
No, well, we're still both independent films. Yeah, it does exist, but it's you just have to piece it together, and sometimes you have to piece it together yourself and find the people who can help you navigate your way through it. But as a sub-industry, yes, it's every analysis of the industry is studio independent. Within the independent space, though, there are some companies which feel like mini studios rather than independent companies. And so again, as having your own production company, you have to see yourself in the context of that and help navigate and find your way through.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Oh, are we okay for time? Can I get a thumbs up for time? Okay. 5 more minutes. Okay, well, we can fit in a couple more questions. If no one has a pressing one, I have one for you. Again, one that was sent earlier on, which is about finishing funds. So how easy or worthwhile is it applying for finishing funds if you're a emerging filmmaker, if you're not known?
It's the same challenge as all fund applications, I think. It's not something which people are always aware of. But just this morning I was reading an article about someone who made their film, had a finished version of it. Well, not finished, semi-finished, probably like the person up there who was talking, who'd actually been on set, had the basic footage, and had done it through, friends and family, Indiegogo, you name it. They'd sourced every penny right down to the decimal points, and applied for finishing funds to then take it to the next stage. So yes, all important part of the process, and every stage needs funding. And once you have your finished film, then you can also apply for distribution support, because the marketing side of it is sometimes even more expensive than the production side. So not to forget that part of it too.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Any last question? One for the road? Yes, the gentleman just there.
Post-Brexit, are there any benefits available now for using production companies in Europe that weren't possible before Brexit?
That's above and beyond my pay grade, I'm afraid.
Okay.
That's co-production. That's the next film. I don't know yet. Talk to me in a couple of years.
Thank you.
I same, but I don't think there would be anything extra that I'm aware of.
I was just thinking if because of we were in Europe and then we're not, that is there an attraction for using production companies in Spain or France that offer additional benefits than before Brexit, when you were tied into the European market and therefore it was all the same?
I mean, I don't know how the rules particularly have changed, but definitely for some films, a European co-production makes a lot of sense, because you can, in the same way that the way I described there's a tax credit here,
sure, yes, yeah.
they're all over the place with different rules in different places. So yeah, there's definitely advantages to that. But if that is something you're interested in and you're a producer, I really recommend the Rotterdam.
No, I'm an actor.
You're an actor.
Well then, no. I'm working on something very closely which I have to speak to you about.
I mean, the co-production treaties existed before Brexit, so they haven't changed. Okay. But as an actor, your eligibility for travel...
No, it wasn't that at all. It's on the production side, which I'll speak to you about.
But yeah, I mean, I think that even with co-productions, it's moving people around is more difficult now than it was. But I'm not aware of any additional financing advantages.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll stop there for this session. I want to thank our guests. Thank you so much, Susan and Georgia, for coming. Big round of applause.
Thank you very much for coming.
I want to thank you all for coming, especially given the random hour of 2 p.m. We weren't sure it would be popular. Turns out it is. Just a flag before I let you go and enjoy yourselves and have a drink. We will be having, hopefully, regular networking events. This was the very first one, but given how popular it seems, I think we're on board for more. The next one is in the works. It will be in August. We'll announce it. And I just want to say that if you as members have anything you'd like to discuss, have a guest that you'd like us to invite to speak, please feel free to email us and recommend someone. That we're totally open to that. Thank you so much. And without further ado, enjoy your drink at the bar and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.